Card declined, the young cashier said, his voice barely a whisper. My son, Kevin, standing beside me with a smirk, boomed. Declined? Dad, what did you buy? Try it again. He gestured to his own overflowing cart of power tools, a mountain of yellow and black plastic. The total is $14,982.17. The cashier looked at me with pity, the store's Saturday morning hustle fading into a low hum. Kevin just laughed. Guess you finally maxed it out, old man, Kevin said, loud enough for the couple behind us to hear. 15 grand, not bad for a guy who just putters around in his workshop. His laughter was sharp and metallic, the sound of a closing trap. He wasn't helping me. He was performing. This was the final act of his play, and my public ruin was the grand finale. He wanted everyone to see that he was in control now. The cashier slid the flimsy, declined receipt across the counter. The bold red letters spelling out "exceeds credit limit" seemed to burn into the formica. The man behind me shifted his weight, pointedly looking away. His wife clutched her purse a little tighter. I was no longer Carl, the friendly neighborhood carpenter who'd helped half this town with their decks and cabinets. I was an old man who couldn't manage his finances, the liability, a failure displayed under the harsh fluorescent lights of Home Depot. I didn't reach for the receipt. Instead, I folded my hands on the counter, my calloused fingers interlocking. I looked past the cashier, past the judgment in the eyes of the other shoppers, and met my son's gaze. I held it. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. A small, quiet smile touched my lips, a detail so out of place in my own financial execution that it made the smirk on Kevin's face falter for just a fraction of a second. He didn't know. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Kevin's bravado returned, mistaking my calm for senile confusion. Well, what are you going to do, Dad? He sneered, gesturing at the mountain of merchandise he intended to steal using my name. The whole world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for me to break, to beg, to explain. I took a slow, deliberate breath, ready to give him my answer. But months earlier, it all began on a quiet Tuesday morning with a simple request. Months before that scene, my workshop was my sanctuary. The air, thick with the scent of cedar and sawdust, was a perfume I'd known my entire life. Every tool had its place. Every surface was something I'd built with my own two hands. My home, this life, was a testament to careful planning and steady work. At 75, my days were quiet. I'd finish my coffee, read the paper, and spend the afternoon turning wood, the rhythmic scrape of the plane, a peaceful counterpoint to my thoughts. Kevin shattered that peace. He arrived unannounced, bursting through the workshop door with a frantic energy that always set my teeth on edge. He was all wide eyes and breathless proclamations. Dad, I've got it. The one. A huge contract to frame 3 custom homes, but I'm cash poor. The margins are tight at the start. I need to get materials on credit just to get the ball rolling. He was a whirlwind of ambition, a storm I'd weathered many times before. He put his hand on my shoulder, his grip surprisingly firm. You taught me everything I know about building, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, almost tender tone. You always said a man is only as good as his tools and his credit. He was using my own words against me, twisting lessons of prudence into a justification for recklessness. He was making me feel like his partner, his mentor, the wise elder whose help was essential for his success. It was a well-rehearsed performance. Here's the thing, he said, pulling a chair close. The supplier gives the best rates on a store card, like your Home Depot one. If you make me an authorized user just for a couple of months, I can buy the lumber and drywall. I'll pay it all off before the first statement even hits. I swear. He made it sound so simple. A minor bit of paperwork, a temporary inconvenience to launch his future. The phrase authorized user sounded so harmless, so official. As he spoke, his eyes scanned the workshop, landing on the dark, dovetailed walnut box in the corner. My father's toolbox. God, you still have that old thing? He scoffed. It's worthless, full of rusty junk. You should throw it out and make room for something useful. The words were a physical blow. That box was my inheritance, not of money, but of craft, of a life spent building things that last. To him, it was just clutter. A memory, sharp and vivid, flooded my mind. A 9-year-old Kevin, standing on a stool right here at this workbench, his small hands struggling to guide a coping saw. We were building his pinewood derby car, using the small chisels and spokeshaves from that very toolbox. He had been so proud of the misshapen block of wood. The contrast between that boy's earnest focus and the man's casual, cruel dismissal of our shared history left a bitter taste in my mouth. But he was my son, my only child. The desire to believe in him, to give him one more chance, was a powerful current. So I nodded. I picked up the phone, and with Kevin pacing impatiently beside me, I spent 20 minutes with a polite woman from the credit card company. I spelled out his name. I confirmed my permission. The finality of her words, "He is now an authorized user on your account, sir," echoed in the quiet workshop long after I hung up. For a week, everything seemed fine. The email alerts pinged with charges for things that made sense: 2x4s, bags of concrete, sheets of plywood. $3,000 appeared on the balance, then 4. I felt a quiet sense of pride, the feeling that I was helping him build something real. I was investing in my son's future, using the good credit I had spent a lifetime building. The risk, I told myself, was a measure of my fatherly faith. Then came the first discordant note. An alert for a charge of $1,249.99. The item description: Weber Genesis 2 E335 gas grill. It wasn't lumber. It wasn't drywall. It was a luxury I would never dream of buying for myself. A cold knot formed in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't part of the plan. I immediately picked up the phone, a tremor of unease in my hand as I dialed his number. "Oh, that?" Kevin's voice on the phone was slick with false confidence, a salesman's oily charm. "That's for client entertainment, Dad. You have to wine and dine these developers. It's a business expense. You gotta spend money to make money, you know?" There was no apology, no hesitation. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it was clear he had already prepared it. The betrayal wasn't just in the purchase. It was in the ease of his deception. After the grill, the dam broke. Alerts came in daily: 3 DeWalt hammer drills, 2 sets of scaffolding, 5 top-of-the-line sawzalls. Then, the most brazen charges of all: gift cards. $500 at a time, purchased in separate transactions. There was no construction project on Earth that required that many gift cards. He wasn't building houses. He was systematically dismantling my financial stability, one fraudulent purchase at a time. The balance surged past $10,000. The credit limit I'd kept pristine for half a century, a symbol of my reliability, was now a runaway train. My perfect score was plummeting with every alert. The credit card payment was due at the end of the week, a hard deadline circled in red on my calendar. The minimum payment alone was more than my entire monthly pension check. For the first time in my life, I felt the cold grip of real fear. My own humiliation came on a Thursday. I went to the local Home Depot to buy a single $10 blade for my table saw. A simple, necessary purchase. Bill, the young man at the pro desk who I'd known since he was a teenager, ran my card. He frowned, then ran it again. Mr. C, it's declined," he mumbled, his eyes refusing to meet mine. The system had flagged the massive, unusual balance. My name, once gold in the store, was now suspect. A wave of hot shame washed over me. I fumbled for my debit card, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get it out of my wallet. I paid for the blade and fled, not even waiting for the receipt. Bill's quiet, concerned, "Everything okay, Mr. C?" followed me out the door. In that moment, I wasn't just in debt. I was diminished. My son had stolen more than my credit. He had stolen my standing, my dignity, in the one place I always felt respected. That night, my call to Kevin was not a request, but a demand. "What have you done?" I asked, my voice tight. He laughed, a chilling, ugly sound devoid of any warmth. "Relax, Dad. It's called leverage. I'm just borrowing the credit. His business is my business, right? I told you I'd handle it." He was treating my life's work as his personal slush fund. Before I could respond, he hung up. The dial tone felt like a final insult. The next afternoon, I saw it with my own eyes. I was driving home from the grocery store when I took a different route, one that led past another Home Depot location across town. And there, in the far corner of the parking lot, was Kevin's pickup truck. The tailgate was down. He was standing beside it, negotiating with two men, selling them brand new, in-the-box DeWalt power tools for cash. My cash. My credit. There was no construction business. There were no client meetings. It was all a lie. He was buying top-tier tools on my card and flipping them for untraceable cash at a 50% loss, and he didn't care because it wasn't his money. The smell of fertilizer and mulch from the store's garden center drifted through my open car window, a scent I usually loved. Now it just smelled like rot. The betrayal was absolute, a physical sickness in my gut. I drove home in a daze. I walked straight to my workshop, the one place that still felt like my own, and sat on the stool where my son once sat. My eyes fell upon my father's toolbox. It seemed to hum with a quiet integrity that shamed everything my son had become. I lifted the heavy walnut lid. The scent of old steel, linseed oil, and cedar washed over me. Inside, my father's tools lay nestled in their felt-lined trays, perfectly maintained, ready for honest work. My father wasn't just a carpenter. He was a meticulous record keeper. Tucked in a hidden compartment beneath the main tray, I knew he kept his important papers. I pulled out the latest credit card statement I had printed, the paper trembling in my hand. The balance was now $14,872.41. The credit limit was $15,000. The payment was due in 3 days. I was a retired man on a fixed income. This was ruin. Utter and complete ruin, orchestrated by my own flesh and blood. My late wife Donna's voice echoed in the silence. She had always seen the grasping need in Kevin, the hunger that had nothing to do with ambition. "Be careful, Carl," she'd say, her hand on my arm. "His heart is good, but his hands are fast." I had waved away her concerns, blinded by a father's love. Now, her gentle warning was a screaming indictment of my own foolishness. I had defended him, and in doing so, I had paved the very road to my own destruction. Desperate, I saw a sliver of false hope. I remembered my neighbor, a young lawyer named Mark, who specialized in financial disputes. I swallowed my pride, walked next door, and laid out the entire sordid story. The stack of damning receipts spread across his kitchen table. He listened patiently, his expression growing more concerned with each detail. "This is bad, Carl," he said, "but being an authorized user, it's a gray area. Let me make some calls." For a moment, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of relief. The next day, Mark called back, and his voice was grim. The hope I'd nurtured withered and died. "I'm sorry, Carl. The credit card company's position is firm. You authorized him to use the account. Legally, you're on the hook for every cent. They don't distinguish between lumber for a job and a gas grill. To them, it's all your debt." The crushing defeat was absolute. The system I had trusted my entire life was now the very thing strangling me. I was at my lowest point. The deadline for the payment was tomorrow. I sat in my workshop, the silence pressing in. My gaze drifted again to my father's toolbox. It no longer felt like a sanctuary, but a museum of a life that was over. A life of honor and hard work, now ending in debt and public shame. I ran my hand over the smooth, oiled walnut, the cool wood a stark contrast to the burning humiliation in my chest. It was a symbol of my profound loss. Kevin chose that exact moment to call. His tone was not conciliatory. It was triumphant. "Hey, Dad, I need one last thing. I'm at Home Depot, and there's a great deal on a floor nailer. Should put me right at the limit. We can talk about paying it back once I get the first check from the job." He was still playing the part, still spinning the lie, even now. The arrogance was breathtaking. He wasn't just a thief. He was a performer who couldn't leave the stage. That's when I decided. The final, blatant lie was the spark. I felt a cold calm settle over me, but clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. "Sure, son," I said, my voice even, almost gentle. "You get what you need. I'll meet you there in an hour. We can sort this all out at the checkout. He agreed, a smug satisfaction in his voice. He thought he was coming for his final prize. He had no idea he was walking into a reckoning. Before leaving, something compelled me to open my father's toolbox one last time. Not for the tools, but for the papers hidden in the false bottom. It was mostly old warranties and deeds, but there was also a small leather-bound notebook. My father's handwriting filled the pages. He had detailed every major project, every loan, every contract. He was a man who understood the fine print. And on the last page there was an entry from 1982. He had co-signed a loan for my first truck. He wrote signed for Carl's Ford, important, specified as guarantor, not co-borrower. The bank clerk said it's a key distinction. They can pursue me only after they prove he can't pay. Protects my own assets. It was a small detail, a legal nuance from 40 years ago, but it lit a fire in my mind. A distinction. I suddenly remembered the exact words of the credit card representative on the phone. He is now an authorized user. I logged into my online account, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I didn't look at the balance. I went straight to the legal documents. The terms and conditions I, like everyone else, had agreed to without reading. I searched for authorized user. The paragraph that appeared made my heart pound. It was dense with legalese, but the core message was crystal clear, a beacon in the fog of my despair. The distinction was everything. An authorized user is granted access for convenience. They are not a co-owner of the debt. While the primary cardholder is responsible for payment to the company, the agreement also stated that charges deemed fraudulent or outside the scope of the user's permission could be disputed. It laid out a specific process for pursuing fraud charges against an authorized user who had abused their privileges. It wasn't a gray area, it was black and white. Kevin had told me he needed the card for a specific purpose, framing materials for 3 houses. Every charge for power tools to be resold, for gift cards, for a luxury grill, was a clear violation of that verbal contract. It was fraud. The company had a dedicated department for exactly this kind of betrayal. My father's dusty old toolbox, the one Kevin dismissed as worthless junk, had just handed me the key. It hadn't held a weapon, but an idea. With cold, calculated precision, I made my first call, not to the billing department, but to the fraud division. I spent 30 minutes on the phone with a woman named Maria. I didn't yell or plead. I calmly stated the facts. My son was authorized for specific construction materials. I have a list of purchases, beginning with a Weber grill, that are fraudulent. I used their language. I used the distinction my father had taught me from beyond the grave. Maria was professional and efficient. I see, sir. You are reporting a case of authorized user abuse. We will open an investigation immediately. We are freezing the account, pending the outcome, and will begin the chargeback process on the disputed items. A freeze, a chargeback. These were not the words of defeat. They were the sounds of gears grinding into motion, of a powerful machine stirring to life on my behalf. The weight on my chest began to lift. My second call was to Bill at the local Home Depot Pro Desk. Bill, it's Carl, I said. I need a favor. My son Kevin is on his way to the store across town. When he gets to the checkout with a cart full of tools, could you call the manager there and have them phone me? I'll be waiting in the parking lot. Bill didn't ask questions. He just said, "You got it, Mr. C. I hope everything's okay." His simple act of loyalty was a balm on my wounded pride. I drove to the Home Depot. The Saturday morning sun was bright, the air filled with the same smell of fertilizer and lumber as before, but this time it smelled like opportunity. I parked where I could see the entrance, and I waited. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a profound, chilling sense of purpose. Donna had always said my greatest strength wasn't in my hands, but in my patience. I was about to prove her right. 10 minutes later, I saw Kevin's truck pull into the lot. He strode into the store with the swagger of a man who owned the world, completely unaware that the foundation of his kingdom was crumbling beneath his feet. He was about to deliver his final arrogant insult, not knowing the trap had already been sprung. He thought this was his victory lap. He was wrong. This was his judgment. My phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Mr. C, a man's voice asked. This is Dave, the manager at the North Side Home Depot. Bill from the other store said you wanted a call. Your son is here at checkout 1 with about $2,000 worth of merchandise. I could hear the beeping of the register in the background. The stage was set. Thank you, Dave, I said calmly. I'm on my way in. I walked through the automatic doors, the familiar whoosh of air a prelude to the confrontation. I saw him there, at the end of the checkout lane, tapping his foot impatiently as the cashier scanned the last item. He had a massive flooring nailer, boxes of cleats, and for good measure, another high-end drill. He was squeezing every last drop of credit out of me, a final act of parasitic greed. He saw me approaching and grinned, a wolfish, predatory expression. There you are, old man, he boomed, gesturing to the cashier. Just in time. Ring it up. He looked at me, his eyes glittering with condescending triumph. Don't worry, I'll make sure you get paid back, first thing. This was his final insult, the last twist of the knife, a promise he had no intention of keeping, delivered in front of strangers to cement my role as the doddering, generous fool. He had no idea he was speaking to a ghost. The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, ran the card. She frowned. She ran it again. The small screen on the card reader flashed a message. I'm sorry, sir, she said, looking at Kevin. It's declined. Says the account has been frozen. Kevin's smile vanished, replaced by a flash of pure fury. What? Frozen? That's impossible. Run it again, he snarled, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet of the checkout area. And that is when we returned to the beginning. He turned his rage on me. Declined? Dad, what did you buy? It was the same script, the same performance of manufactured outrage. But this time, I knew the truth. This time, the pity in the eyes of the other shoppers was not for me, but for the spectacle he was creating. The cashier looked from him to me, a silent question in her eyes. Guess you finally maxed it out, old man, he said, the words dripping with venom. His laughter was forced now, brittle and thin. He was trying to regain control of the narrative, to paint me as the incompetent one. He was trying to humiliate me into fixing his problem, into making another call to smooth things over. But the time for smoothing things over was long past. The gears were already in motion. The manager, Dave, who had called me earlier, was already walking over, a grim look on his face. Is there a problem here? He asked, his voice calm but firm. Kevin rounded on him. Yeah, there's a problem. My father's card isn't working. He probably forgot to pay the bill. He gestured at me as if I were a piece of faulty equipment, a senile old man who was embarrassing him. I finally broke my silence. My voice was quiet, but it cut through Kevin's blustering. The card isn't working because the account is frozen, Kevin. I looked him directly in the eye. It's frozen because I reported nearly $15,000 of fraudulent charges this morning. His face went slack, the color draining from his cheeks. For the first time, a flicker of genuine fear appeared in his eyes. The performance was over. Fraudulent. What are you talking about? He stammered, his voice losing its confident edge. You authorized me. You made me a user. He was grasping at the lie, the flimsy legal shield he thought protected him. He looked around, seeking validation from the small crowd that had gathered, but found only stern, judging faces. He was no longer the charming son. He was a cornered animal. I authorized you to buy materials for a construction job, I stated, each word a carefully placed stone. Not a gas grill, not gift cards, not tools to be sold for cash in a parking lot. I let the last phrase hang in the air. The manager's eyes widened slightly. Kevin's jaw dropped. He had been caught, utterly and completely. The public humiliation he had engineered for me was now crashing down upon his own head. The manager, Dave, stepped forward, placing himself subtly between Kevin and the counter. Sir, he said to Kevin, his tone shifting from managerial to authoritative, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the merchandise. We can't complete this sale. Kevin looked from the cart full of tools to me, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. You can't do this, he hissed, his voice a low, desperate whisper. You are my father. Being my father is exactly why I am doing this, I replied, my voice unwavering. You used my trust. You used my name, and you tried to destroy my life for your own greed. The credit card company will be conducting a full investigation." The word investigation hung in the air, heavy with the implication of police reports and legal consequences. The chargeback process had begun, and every fraudulent item he'd bought was now a piece of evidence against him. He took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. "You old fool, you've ruined everything," he spat. Two store employees began moving closer, alerted by the tension, but I didn't flinch. I had seen this rage before, the tantrum of a child who had been denied what he believed was his, but he was not a child, and I was no longer his enabler. I simply stood my ground, my silence a more powerful shield than any argument. The beautiful thing about the chargeback was its brutal efficiency. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a reversal. The funds for every disputed item were being clawed back from the merchant. And since Kevin had sold most of the physical goods for cash, he would now be left with a massive debt owed directly to the credit card company's collections department. My name was being cleared, while his was being flagged. "The debt is yours now, Kevin," I said, my voice low and final. "Every dollar of it. You were an authorized user, not a co-owner. You had permission, not ownership. There's a distinction." I saw a flash of my father in my mind, nodding in approval. The lesson from his old notebook had become a weapon, and it had struck a mortal blow. The legal twist he never saw coming had completely undone him. Defeated, he seemed to shrink. The bravado, the arrogance, it all evaporated under the harsh fluorescent lights, leaving behind a hollowed-out man-child. He gave me one last look, a pathetic mixture of hatred and pleading, then turned and stalked out of the store without another word, leaving the cart of unpaid-for tools behind like a monument to his failure. The automatic doors whooshed shut behind him, a final, definitive sound. The manager turned to me. "Mr. C, I am so sorry you had to go through that." He shook his head. "Is there anything we can do?" I looked at the cashier, the other shoppers, who were now trying to pretend they hadn't been watching the whole drama unfold. My public humiliation had been transformed into a quiet, solemn public restoration of my honor. "No, thank you, Dave," I said. "I think everything has been taken care of." As I walked out into the parking lot, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Maria at the fraud department. The subject line was, "Case number 743B, initial reversals processed." I opened it. A long list of charges, including the Weber grill and all the DeWalt tools, were marked credit applied, pending investigation. The total at the bottom of the email was a negative number. Negative $12,547.88. The weight of the world lifted from my shoulders. I drove home, the familiar route feeling different, lighter. The world seemed sharper, the colors more vibrant. When I got home, I walked straight into my workshop. The air smelled of cedar and promise again. I ran my hand over the walnut top of my father's toolbox. He had given me more than just tools. He had given me the knowledge that the smallest details, the finest print, hold the greatest power. It wasn't worthless junk. It was my salvation. A week later, I received a formal letter from the credit card company. The investigation was complete. The fraudulent charges had been permanently removed from my account. My credit line was restored, and my balance was zero. A separate paragraph noted that their collections and legal departments would be pursuing the matter vigorously with Mr. Kevin Carpenter. The machine I had set in motion was now unstoppable. I never heard from Kevin directly, but I heard through the grapevine. I heard his contracting business, which never really existed, had folded. I heard he was being hounded by debt collectors. I heard he had to sell his fancy pickup truck, the one he used to haul away the tools he'd stolen from me, to cover a fraction of what he now owed. His life of easy credit and zero accountability was over. One final piece of mail arrived about a month after the incident. It was a pre-approved credit card offer, addressed to me. The credit limit they were offering was even higher than before. My score, which had plummeted, had rebounded completely, and then some. It was a small thing, a piece of junk mail to most, but to me, it was a symbol. It was proof that my name, the name I had built over 75 years, was clean again. I sat at my workbench, the place where it all began, and I thought about Donna. I had finally heeded her warning. I had protected what we had built together. I felt a quiet sense of peace settle over me, the kind that only comes from setting a deeply disordered thing right again. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about restoring balance. It was about justice. The recurring scent of sawdust and oil in my workshop, a motif of my life's work, no longer felt tinged with the bitterness of betrayal. It was just the smell of honest labor once more. I picked up a piece of maple, feeling the smooth grain beneath my calloused fingers. I had a project in mind, a small jewelry box for my granddaughter, something built to last, a testament to care and precision. Before starting, I opened my father's toolbox. The tools lay there, silent and ready. The hidden compartment, however, held a new document. It was a copy of the letter from the credit card company, the one that confirmed my vindication. I placed it alongside my father's old notebook, a new entry in the family ledger, a new lesson learned and recorded for the future. My life returned to its peaceful rhythm. The Saturday morning trips to Home Depot were no longer fraught with shame. Bill at the pro desk would greet me with a warm smile and a nod of respect. I was Mr. C again, the carpenter, the man who built things, the man who honored his word. My son had tried to tear down my legacy, but in the end, he had only succeeded in cementing it. I never knew what happened with the legal side of things for Kevin. I never asked. My part in his story was over. I had drawn a line, not with anger, but with the cold, hard tool of consequence. He had made his choices, and now he was living with them. My choice was to return to my own life, to the quiet satisfaction of a well-made joint and a straight cut. The toolbox sits in the same corner of my workshop, a silent guardian. It's more than just wood and steel. It's a repository of wisdom, a reminder that true value is rarely on the surface. It's a testament to the fact that a foundation built on integrity is something that can never truly be destroyed, no matter how hard someone tries to tear it down. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. The balance was healthy, the credit score pristine. I scrolled to the list of authorized users on my Home Depot account. There was only one name there now, my own. With a few decisive taps, I had removed his name forever. The digital severing was as clean and final as a cut from my sharpest chisel. A quiet, profound feeling of closure washed over me. I closed the app, set the phone down on the workbench, and picked up my tools. The wood was waiting. There were still good and beautiful things to be built in this world, and I had work to do. I switched on the overhead lamp, its bright light chasing away the last of the shadows, and I got back to work. I had a jewelry box to finish,